Today I want to talk to you about how Tyndale transformed biblical worship. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard that story before with William Tyndale, but he's played a really important part in how we understand worship in the Bible. And I'd like to take a minute, if you just give me your time now, I'd like to take a minute and just kind of let you know what this is all about. Are you ready for this, though? That's what I want to know. So hang on to your hat, because the word worship is not in the Bible. You say, what, John? No, I'm serious. The word worship is not in the Bible. I mean in the original Bible. It was inserted into the Bible. John, what are you talking about? Inserted into the Bible during the first rendering of the Hebrew and Greek into the English. I kid you not. It's true. I discovered it quite by accident. And that's an exciting story in itself. You won't find this anywhere else on the internet, but you'll find it on meinhardt.com, and you'll find it in the studies and the books that I published. Now, right to the task. Contrary to public opinion, worship derives not from the Scriptures, but from the work of William Tyndale around 1536 in his translation of the Bible. He was the first one to translate the Hebrew and Greek texts into English. The very, very first one. The first scholar to do it. Now, when he did this, Tyndale faced a tremendous challenge in interpreting the Hebrew and Greek verbs into English. Now, stay with me for a minute, because it's going to be worth it for you to understand this. He faced a special hurdle in translating the Hebrew shachah. Say it out loud. Say it right now. Shachah. C-H-S-H-A-C-H-A. Meaning to bow down or prostrate oneself before God, an idol or a king. Now that word shachah, say it again, shachah, is the word that means to bow down in obeisance. Now, consider the example of Abraham's servant. You remember the story of Abraham? Abraham wanted to get a wife, like fathers normally do, for Isaac. When he realized that, he sent a servant out, and when the servant realized that Rebekah might be the one, what did he do? He went aside and he bowed down in obeisance to the Lord, and he said, Lord, I'm committing this lady into your hands and your care, because I think she's the one Isaac wants. Now, that literal rendering of the Hebrew text is this verb here, this sentence here from Genesis 24:26. Now, stay with me. The literal rendering is, the man bowed his head and bowed himself before the Lord. The man bowed his head and bowed himself before the Lord. Now the first verb, bowed, is the Hebrew verb kavad. Say it, kavad. But he bowed his head and then bowed before the Lord. The second verb is shachar. So he kavad, bowed down, and he shachad, bowed down. Are you still with me? Both of the men bow down, and they're used in the same sentence. Tyndale faced the problem of translating a Hebrew expression into vernacular English that meant, that had some meaning to it. He certainly wouldn't have rendered it, the man bowed his head and bowed his head, would he? Now, would you do that if you were translating it? This would be redundant. Tyndale substituted the word worship in the second sentence, the word shachah. He translated it worship. Because at that time in English, it meant what? Bowing down. and so he was able to say to the English reader that he bowed down and worshiped. That is, he bowed down and then he bowed in obeisance to God. Now, what does all this mean? Well, it means that when you see the word worship in the English Bible, you don't think in terms of what happened in your church house Sunday morning. You think of what happened when the servant bowed down before the Lord, and he bowed in obeisance to God. Now, my continued research into this subject led me to a museum. I'm from Phoenix, by the way. I haven't told you that, but that's no secret. There is a museum just outside of Phoenix, in Litchfield Park, known as Jonathan Bird's Rare Books and Bibles. And after plowing through Tyndale's several introductions to the books that he wrote, I came across what Tyndale wrote down to explain why he used the word worship to translate the Hebrew. Now, you don't think that's important? Well, it's very, very important, because when I found that out, I knew it wasn't guessing. Now, here's what Tyndale wrote in his prologue to the book of Exodus, his introduction, about why he selected the word worship. Here's what he said. Worship. By worshiping, whether it be in the Old Testament or the New, understand the bowing of a man's self upon the ground, as we oftentimes do, as we kneel in our prayers, bow ourselves, and lie on our arms and hands, and our face to the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, when I read that, I was in a little library, in a little museum, and I jumped to my feet and I cried, Eureka! I have found it! And I really mean that. I did it because I had learned right from the pen of the scholar himself why he chose the word worship for the word shakah, and that whenever we see the word worship, he meant by it, and therefore we must mean by it, our bowing and obeisance to God. Friends, it doesn't matter. It doesn't define the worthiness of God, which is often what we hear about. The word worship has nothing to do with the worthiness of God, although God is worthy. It describes our bowing and obeisance before the Father through the Son and the Holy Spirit. And so, what are we talking about? We're talking about the contribution of Tyndale to your reading the Bible and my reading the Bible. Whenever we see the word worship, we say, Lord. That means of bowing and obeisance. And that calls me to submit my life in all of its details, in all of its events, to Jesus Christ as my Lord. Thank you for stopping and visiting with me today.